Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everybody. Welcome back.
Good morning.
It's a morning.
It's Thursday.
It's a Thursday. Jumping into our main topic for today, our main topic will be talking about what does real-time analytics look like in Fabric? How's this going to kind of handle, doing some, do we think this is going to be a thing? Will this actually be something people will want to use? Go into that, our main topic for today. But before we do that, let's hit some news articles that are coming out today. We have an amazing announcement from the tips and theme generator space. So we've been working quite hard here at the tips warehouse as we've been trying to build things for tools that help you build reports faster, quicker, and easier. We just recently released in the last couple months this thing called wireframing, where you can build your own pages, you can add your visuals to the pages. Well, today we now have out AI generated wireframes for you. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So it really helps out your workflow. It makes a lot of things automated for you. The idea here of this feature is you can create your background image, and we like to call those a scrim. So you create your various scrim or pages with images on them. And then if you have bounding boxes on those pages for where you think the visuals will go, you can now just run our AI on top of it, and it will go through, scan your image, and automatically place all the visuals on the page for you. So it'll actually it'll find the boundaries of your squares and pre-place the visuals. And then you can change the visuals, like you can change the visual type. We do some guessing. And we also have added another feature where you can use an automatic layout. So we have some pre-designed orientations of where we think visuals should go. So you can click a layout and then immediately add your visuals where they want to go. I think it's going to be a huge time saver. And now you can focus less on getting every pixel correct on the page, and you can just focus on getting the image right for the page, which I think will speed up your workflow quite a lot. Seth's been playing with it a little bit. Tommy's been playing with it a tad. Yeah,
it does, man. Like so if you spent any time building your own background images, right? Like layout,
PowerPoint, whatever
sort.
Yep.
There's still the time-consuming aspect of like getting the visual, even within our tool, like creating a visual, sizing it appropriately, alignment, spacing, like all of which are very important, especially if you're spending a bunch of time on, the look and feel, which you should be. So this is exciting, man. Like this takes that, very tedious process, and it just bam, like quick, one button generates the visuals. And with it, like the cool thing is, regardless of whether or not it selects the right visual for the space, it's so easy to change, right? It's the dimensions, it's the setting. Like, check it out. You guys have to go check it out.
It's amazing.
Super cool. And I love the fact that you don't even have to have the background image, right? Like we're applying it in multiple different ways in the tool, where you can just have the, a regular color. And then there's still this option of like, oh, do you want some wireframes that we've, generated that have this spacing, whatnot, as a starter? Yeah. Okay. Click the button. Boom. So yeah, I'm super excited about it because it does extremely speed up that process of just getting to the point where, you're going to apply a theme or whatever. So we're super excited about it. It is out in the wild. As usual, we're a little behind, so we'll have some documentation and videos coming out here shortly to outline
literally hot off the press.
Yeah, how it all works. But super excited about getting that out the door.
I think
Tommy, any impressions from your side?
Seth, you're dead on, because how many times 80% of what we do is the data modeling, the data cleaning. Oh, now I got to do the layout side, and what do I want to fit in? I'm amazed. It's a click of a button. I think my favorite part is I don't need an F64 license or SKU to use it either.
Right. There's no, you don't have to pay more money to get all the features. So we do give you a trial ability. You can try it on 2 pages to see if it works for some of your scrims. If you want a larger than 2-page report, you can buy the Tips Plus subscription, and you can get unlimited pages in your reports. So we are giving you the feature fully functional, fully available to run on a 2-page report, so you can see how it works, if it works with your background images, your stuff. So we want to make sure you can test it out. But if you want a larger report, usually you want a report with more than 1 page or 2 pages. So we recommend you go buy the Tips Plus subscription, and then you can save your backgrounds, your images, everything gets saved to your profile. so you can come back and use it later. So I think it's going to be an amazing performance improvement anytime you're building a report. So we really like it. We're trying to make it fast and easy to build stuff. We hope you do too. All right, with that, let's transition over to another topic that I found here. Here's the article, and I'll put it here in the chat window as well. This is an article from Microsoft talking about, this is the first time I've seen them really publish, and there may have been other things. I think this is maybe just the first time they're really announcing things here. They're talking heavily around how do you do the medallion architecture within the Microsoft Fabric Lakehouse pattern. So there's actually a little diagram here. This is the article that came out today. Kim Manis, I have to give her mad credit for this one. I can never find things on Microsoft Learn. I Google for things and it doesn't show up. So when new articles appear, I have to like go find where it came from. And Kim shared it, which thank you, Kim, for sharing this article. This is where I found it. And it starts talking a lot about how does one lake? How does this work inside Fabric? Where do you put your different lake houses? What is, where do you build your bronze, silver, and gold? And so love this architecture. Been building this for years. I think this is the right way to go. The more I look at Microsoft and what they're doing here, they are more closely aligning to Delta tables, which is amazing. It's helping so much. It's making my life so much easier. But there's one little sentence that I caught about halfway down the article, and it talked about some guidance around how to build this one. One of the areas they're talking about for security and control, you have a bronze lake house. That's a separate lake house than silver and gold. So there's 3 separate lake houses that you're building, one with each type of data in it. They recommended if you need more security controls around those different lake houses, that you should build additional workspaces. So if I think this thing through, I could have an entire workspace just for bronze. I could have another entire workspace for silver. And I could have a final workspace for all things gold. And then potentially you might have additional workspaces around data sets and or reports. So where previously we would have 2 workspaces, one for data sets and one for reports, because we could separate the 2. Yeah, Johnny, you're in my opinion. Johnny in the chat just threw down the emoji puke icon. We are now at a place where we could potentially have, for every environment that you need, you could potentially have 5 workspaces.
Five?
5 workspaces.
Are you sure about that?
One for bronze, silver, gold.
Yeah.
And then one for data sets, and then one for reports.
Okay.
I mean, that's like the starting point, I think. Like if you listen to their guidance and say, look, I need, if I don't want the team doing development to have access to the test workspace, right? Because you may not want your developers playing around in test. That's for testing, right? And if you don't want your developers building things in prod, maybe you don't give control to. So if you want to remove control from the people building the things in the dev space, you've got to physically separate them by workspaces.
So isn't the other recommendation that you just build a different workspace for dev, test, prod?
Okay, so 5 for just prod
by is what I'm getting at.
Yeah. 5 times 3 more
15
environments.
To 20 workspaces?
Yes.
For dev test, dev QA, UAT prod environments, or dev test prod.
Yes.
And then I'm going to have
5 times 3.
And that's if you have all your engineers in the entire development pipeline, which you're not going to. You're probably going to have them split up.
This goes back to our sorry.
No, where do domains fit in this? Right? Like, like this is a perfect place where domains would maybe help, but domains don't. It's a higher level over the workspace.
Okay, everyone's jumping in the chat, and I agree with you. Unmanageable, Johnny. You're spot on. He's got dev, test, prod, raw, base, curate, data sets. Like there's so many. Good thing we have Git integration. Let's just say that because now we can at least automate things to some degree a little bit here. But this is going to be
really pushing purview. That's for sure. The only way to manage this.
Yes.
So this goes back to our earlier conversation where we talked at length about workspaces, and one of the things that blows my mind is this is a permissions thing. Why do I have to build more infrastructure for a permission? If I have an environment or workspace, then give me more granular permissions that allow me to just use security to say, yep, this is what they have access to, or this is what they don't have access to. Unless these objects, Mike, to your point, I can only create one lakehouse in a workspace, then
You
I'm
could create as many as you want, but like I think the idea here is like you can't tell people not to touch one of them, right? You can't quarantine them without having
which is just
the control surface area is like the workspace is like who actually gets access, like the creator part of this thing, and it hasn't changed. Like this is the same mantra that Microsoft has been using for like all workspaces, and that's
the problem with this.
Just a lot.
Even if you do add like what you in my opinion you should have right now, which is security levels of this, is if you start recommending that people go down this route, how do you unwind from it if you do add security to that?
Yes.
Right? Like this is like to me extremely frustrating because these aren't folders, right? You're creating a workspace. It's an ecosystem, right? And you're making that it's the same arguments that we had around what workspaces were in Office, like Office 365 groups, all the stuff they spun up in the environment that had O365 admins just losing their minds.
Yep.
Every time somebody in Power BI was like, HR test, like boom, like everything.
Test one,
SharePoint
test two,
folders,
test
SharePoint sites, all the whole thing. Well, this is the same thing.
Yes.
And I think, this blows my mind. But you're right. The conversation we had about roles and workspaces, everything in a lake house is available if you have permissions on the workspace, which still blows my mind because if we're elevating the lake house and we're in a sense de-escalating the semantic model, why does the semantic model have so much control around who can build, who can edit, who can read? We have that off the semantic model, but we have nothing on the lake house on this. If this is the way, because if this is a
yes and no. I mean, there is a little bit of control at the lake house, so I can give you access to a lake house without giving you access to the workspace. So that does exist, which is kind of similar to like models, semantic models, because you can provide build access or not to the data set that's not part of the workspace. So at some level, I do agree with that piece as well.
As similar as we're on Sirius FM. That's the how much this relates. That is as similar as us as actually a radio show. There's some crossover, but
it's vague.
I get the argument that like, okay, you want a separate workspace for dev test prod. Fine. Right. That delineates large swaths of things I can do into those buckets. This is just not one of those things. I do like Johnny Winter's comment. You get a workspace and you get a workspace. It's like, oh my God.
There's a meme incoming. If someone rip it out, let's get the meme going. I will support it and I will promote that meme. So someone go build out the Oprah meme about everyone gets workspaces now. So, I mean, regardless, I'm just happy. One thing is I am just happy that Microsoft is now providing some recommendations around how they see things getting built, because it's been kind of quiet from their front. They just kind of they just made all the artifacts and say, here's all the stuff you can build now. And then here you go. And then that's it. So we're going to have to figure out how this is getting managed. One thing I'll also note here, and again, if we think about lake houses, I mean, lake houses should be a larger design effort anyways. So contrary to like, okay, I'm the business unit and I'm just making reports and semantic models, right? The warehouse, I do think, and this is where I'm going to lean on what Tommy kind of really recommends here, that's more of a central team action. Yes, you can have business units doing their own thing, but I would argue that in that business unit, they'll probably put their lake houses in the same workspace as their data sets, and their semantic models and their reports. They'll just build one big pile of everything. That probably makes sense for the business unit because that can kind of isolate them to only things that they can touch, and they can control their access that way. When you're talking central BI and you're talking large dimensions across the entire organization, when you're talking,
where all these enterprise tools come from,
right?
Like
exactly.
That thing.
That's, to me, that's where you're going to need to start talking about the larger control surface area of, I think for that central BI team, you're going to need better planning to figure out, okay, who really needs to have access to these different artifacts and how things are going to work through each of the items all across those elements.
To me, the last thing I'll say about this, I still think the problem is we have still ill-defined, and I think Microsoft too, is what is the best practice for the lakehouse? How much data goes into a single lakehouse? Because we've talked about this being for one semantic model, or we're talking about this being for the entire BI team, one single lakehouse. That's ill-defined still. Where does the data warehouse go into if we're actually going to play with that? I'm looking at the documentation. There are like two ways, but to me, this is how big is our lakehouse? How big is a single lakehouse right now? And that is not defined right now in Fabric.
And typically Microsoft doesn't do that. And typically I'm fine with that because there's enough capabilities around the tools that you set it up however it works best for you. This isn't that scenario though.
Right.
Like these are like what I'm seeing, and I'd love to be wrong here. So if someone from Microsoft sees this, like shoot me the roadmap. Like let me see what like all this is going to be, because like right now you're giving me like only one path to go, or it's got to like we're trying to figure things out as we go, and there is no other options here because the way I want to do things, the way I think I should be able to do things, I can't. So I agree with you, Tommy. At bare minimum, if there are limitations, then like at least describe what the best scenario is for me to like put myself in a holding pattern. But blowing out an environment to like 15, 20 workspaces, which you would have to do in certain cases for an enterprise solution, is not a. How do I unwind from that if I do get something better in the future?
Yes.
I don't know. That's the frustration part for me.
Yeah. So at the end, at any rate, one thing on one hand, I'm happy that Microsoft's providing some guidance around what they think is the right way of going about this one. I still feel very firmly around there's going to be lots of patterns that are going to evolve from this. Think through what those patterns look like for your company. You're going to have to, if anything else, it's going to just require some more planning. Just think about and plan what you're going to try to do and do the best you can to plan it out. Lean on others who are building things similar and maybe ask for questions. Hopefully we'll talk enough about how these planning things work for us on the podcast. So, stay tuned. We'll probably have more conversation around what patterns we're finding and what we think will work and what doesn't work, hopefully. Maybe the planning is more about what won't work versus what will work, because it's wide open right now. You can do anything you want.
I think that's why I'm glad we're all kind of reverse engineers at heart, because this is a method without the solution at first. It's kind of like, what is the end goal? And that's where I think all of us are getting kind of stuck. Like, okay, what are we building here? Like, what's the final solution? So, all right, I'm done.
Yeah, this one's gonna get sticky. It just is, because especially when you throw like Databricks into the conversation, right? Especially in Unity Catalog, and some of the things that Adrian just brought up is you're talking about IT teams wanting to replicate and use security groups that are well defined in an Azure cloud ecosystem. That you're saying don't work here. We're just going to not have it work against any of the same enterprise ETL workflows or storage systems that we have access to currently.
What do you mean by that statement? I'm not sure if I follow your comment there, because I mean, you can still use the same security group that's in Azure.
Sure, but if I'm separating things out into permission levels already, because I want to separate out bronze, silver, gold, different layers of like my access, that's an access thing. I can already do that from like the get-go. I don't have to manage that. In other tools to level set permissions.
You mean like
I can get very granular.
Like you're talking like things like Databricks with Unity Catalog, right? So okay, I understand. So yes, then I understand your point, because things like Databricks and Unity Catalog, the Databricks basically has like God mode on top of all the data. It can read and write everything, and then the Unity Catalog says, okay, I know who you are as a user. You can't touch that column. You can't touch that row of data. Well, I think that's what we haven't seen yet, which is where
I'm
fine security,
with.
right?
I'm fine with.
Yeah.
But then making recommendations like this is like, well, like why?
Why would you recommend it if you know?
How do I do this later on? Anyway.
Oh, interesting. This could be a whole episode probably in and of itself. I opened a can of worms. Sorry. Let's get that with that.
The worms.
Yes, exactly.
Continued.
Let's get into our main topic today. Let's talk about our main article that we have out here today. That is the one around Fabric changing the game with real-time analytics. This is the article that we're going to go through. I'll pull it up here and then I'll share it via the chat window. Tommy, give us a kind of an intro of the article. Just give a quick summary of where's Microsoft going with this? What are they trying to do in this article, it seems like?
So this is a lot of the services that used to be an Azure Internet of Things event stream that they're bringing into Fabric, and very similar with a lot of the other tools. However, it's really become an end-to-end real-time solution, or it's really getting close to that. Not only can I do real-time streaming, my own custom app, Event Hub, Event Stream, I can also use any visual from Power BI, push that in, utilize the KQL, and use what is it? Custos or no? Yeah, Custos.
Custo. Yep. The Fabric KQL database, right? That's
KQL
their
database. Yeah.
That's their real time kind of high volume.
Right.
I don't know, database, I guess. That's one area that I haven't played too much with. And I'd be curious in the chat, who else has played with KQL or Custo? I'd be curious. What are your use cases for it?
More KQL than I need to know already.
You do. You've been playing with it?
Yeah, I played around with it a few years ago, at least, like trying to do statements like, why can't you just do SQL? But that's another.
Exactly.
Why is that a completely different language? I have enough languages. But the fact in Fabric is I have this whole end-to-end solution of being able to push data in.
Yeah.
Being able to then push it into different areas, but I can do my own custom application. I can push it into a KQL database all within Fabric. So I don't have to leave the Fabric interface at all to do this whole solution. It's pretty neat. And again, there's that integration with any Power BI report. A Power BI report changes, pushes to this event stream.
Awesome. Seth, where do you see, just kind of getting some initial thoughts here? I mean, real-time analytics, what's kind of your perception on it? Do you see use cases for this today? Do you have a lot of business users asking for real-time data? What are your thoughts on kind of the real?
I have a question for you first.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Based on the title of this, Mike, is this a game changer?
Yes. Okay, so I think this is a fair question. I don't think this is going to change the game.
It doesn't qualify for you as a game changer.
I don't think this is a game changer. I mean, AI for wireframing, that's a game changer. I mean, that's going to change how I enjoy working on reports or not. So that, to me, that's a game changer.
Bet.
And then
I agree with that.
So I'll say this. I like having things as fresh as possible in the data space. I don't like spending a lot of money to make that happen. So I'm torn a little bit here, right? On one hand, from a design standpoint, if I can always load the last 30 minutes of data all the time, I'm going to load very small pieces of data. So those little tiny jobs could run very quickly, and I can continually keep my data things up to date. Cool. On the other hand, that means every 30 minutes, I'm turning some compute on, I'm using something, and it feels like, and this is just my feeling on this one, it feels like Microsoft has basically taken a P SKU and said, hey, we're going to give you an F SKU. We're going to change all this thing called capacity units, and we're going to give you 1,000 more back-end systems that are going to consume more compute capacity. So you're not just going to have power data flows consuming back-end compute. We're not going to give you a lakehouse. We're not going to give you a warehouse. We're not going to give you Custo. We're not going to give you Spark. All these things consume more compute capacity for you to run them inside your Power BI ecosystem. All that real-time is doing, and this is a line that I communicate with customers, is real-time just means you're spending more money to get data to make it real-time. To me, it's like a curve, right? More real-time, more money. It kind of goes together. You're gonna spend more together.
The faster you're pushing data into a visual interface with using Power BI and reporting. Right?
Yep. Yes. So my gut tells me okay, not a game changer. Very helpful so I would say this is probably a nice improvement for so there are use cases for real time. I have found use cases for real time things to be very few and far between. Many companies need to make decisions every day. Very few departments or use cases around, or much less, not very few, much less use cases around, I need to make a decision based on data in the last minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It gets more relevant when you talk about twice a day, once every hour, right? So those use cases are probably more common. So is it game changer? No. But I do think it's very helpful to have all these tools kind of bolted together. So the ease of which you can turn this on, that I do like.
Yeah.
It is very simple to go from nothing to real-time stuff with a couple clicks. Way harder to set up in the infrastructure world in Azure.
Yeah. To answer your question, like where have I seen this, or what use cases are there? Enterprise AR lists out the one I'm familiar with, where organizations want to plug this into manufacturing lines or things that are very real time being made, because getting alerts, understanding like if something's going off the rails, something a product is needs to be refilled, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of like real time use cases that those places have. Choosing Power BI as that solution, I think, I haven't seen a lot of, and the reason is even in some of the POCs or half implementations that I've been a part of, the trick that the trick that is always kind of runs into is there are limitations in the solution that are usually hit a threshold of the technology isn't going to support everything that the customer wants, right? Because when it's in real time, what I've seen is the solutions are good at just spitting data through.
Yes.
And automatically, like, great, customer's happy. But now customer wants to see this, or customer wants to aggregate or include other metadata that's going to make it more meaningful, or add some calculation. Or the minute you start adding in the different layers that we're familiar with as far as transforming data or merging it with others, is where it typically starts to not work, or you run into barriers of like, yep, you can't do that because you're not able to create this type of calculation, or you're not going to be able to show that visualization in that way. And I think that's where it usually falls off, and people go, okay, well, we're going to go build a custom application or use a tool that we have full customization of, because realistically the largest benefit for them is just getting that streaming data. And Microsoft does a great job of that. So like half this, I think, is still very relevant from the standpoint that you have Kusto and KQL and access to these events. And I do think the idea itself of streaming some of this data to an output, whatever that may be, is valuable, because but it's dependent on like what is the importance of the thing you're pulling from all of these events, because ultimately, like, all of the underpinning of events that are happening in the cloud, right, are how you access this, for KQL, whether this is straight up or logic apps or whatever the case may be, because you want to monitor something that's a huge cost driver, or is extremely important that like an alert fires off right away, if a certain usage or threshold starts happening, et cetera. So there's a lot of relevant use cases, I think, for monitoring real-time things, mostly in like triage areas or IT, or like I said, manufacturing, or things that are happening real time. But in terms of like using, the end-to-end in Power BI, those are some of the limitations I've seen.
Well, and it's interesting to say about the calculations, because I think that's where at least this solution really shines, is if you already have the streaming data, using the data activator, using KQL, I can do those calculations. But I'm definitely conflicted, because both you're saying really two sides of the coin that I'm struggling with, where it's easy to turn on, and there are
Heads.
Heads. Sure. Okay. But it is
Tails.
incredible. Maybe next time.
Next to Tommy.
Yeah.
It's a good analogy. Sorry.
Yeah. It's really easy to turn on, but if you are trying to get any specific solution, they are still that custom application. There's still a large learning curve. This is not just a lakehouse and use data flows, or a lakehouse and use some Python. There's still a lot of other steps. Do I have to also integrate an event stream if I already have it? And that to me is one of the big limitations right now. If I already have the data, well, this is a phenomenal solution.
Yes.
And yet I had to turn mine off when I was testing because I had it in one workspace and 70% of my compute for really no streaming for the sample
See,
data
this is
was just this one activator product, this one solution. So,
yes,
and that's a problem if I don't need it though. And I think I want to emphasize this point though. If there is a use case like IT manufacturing, okay, maybe you kind of eat it, but man, like if you don't have the necessity, you're going to go, why is this on?
yes,
it certainly is a cost driver for
My
sure
goodness.
in some cases, but the other challenge to that is in a lot of the reporting that I've done is you're streaming, but then also streaming into storage, which I think
Mhm.
this article outlines too. Like you can push this into a lake house, and the reason you want to do that is because you want to see the historical something, right? Like you want to start tracking, and that's where you've got to like plug off and have that streaming data land somewhere. Otherwise, it's just vapor, right? Going across
mhm,
the visualization. It's like,
yes,
yay, but oh no, yeah, show me that blip. Show me that
Yeah.
blip. Well, we
Yeah.
didn't store that. You know,
yes, exactly.
and that's the nice
Whoops.
thing I think with KQL and Kusto, right? Is
Yes,
that it has that back end, but if you want to pull that, like I said, into other analytics areas, typically it doesn't have all the other metadata that you need to plug onto it, right? So
mm,
or
mhm,
available in the system. So it can't just be a Kusto query. It's got to be, synced with something else that is more meaningful to the business. And that's where this is always in my experience, always been a two-part solution. You're
yes.
always pushing to another storage location where
Oh,
you
100%.
can do traditional analytics on it and produce those in the same report, or the ancillary report where we've got an alert, we've got to go take action on something, but then there's the retro part of it, or things over time, or how many errors have happened in the last week, month,
Yeah.
year, whatever the case may be, and
Yes,
that's
yes.
where you do have to store that stuff.
Well, I like where you're going with this one, Seth. And I think there's actually two. If you think about the reporting needs, right? There's a when you think about building the report, there's the audience, right? Who's the user? And then we try and link their action to visuals that are on the page. And I think you make a great point here because I think if I'm designing a report or reports around real-time data, there is another feature of that report that is, do I need to make decisions on it right now? Or am I looking at more
Yeah.
trending of that pattern over time? And I don't think you want to mix those two reports together. You want to have a very defined report design for this is real-time data. That's what I'm focusing on. On the flip side, you should have another report either connected to a different data set or something else that's describing more of those longer term trends, because again, the shape of the data that you're getting from the streaming system isn't always the right way of thinking about it for longer term reporting. Depending on how your data sources work, the stream of data coming in might be making new dimensions that you can't handle inside that longer term reporting because you have to dynamically adjust dimension tables and star schemas. So there
Right.
is additional processing that may need to happen between the real time data and the long term data. Now, you would want to blend those two reports inside an app. So I could have, hey, here's the real time report of what's happening right now. Here's the trending report that's more star schema and designed for changes over time kind of stuff. So I think those are two distinct use cases, and by separating those into different reports, I think you can still achieve the same goal around reporting for that real-time data, but now you can move more towards two distinct design patterns. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
It does. It does. And the other part of this that where my mind goes is like even in real time scenarios, do you really need real time, or is 10 minutes okay, or 15, right? Because
Yeah, true.
like I could give you the full suite of everything capable and like that we can do if
Yep.
all we're trimming is 1,000 records every 15 minutes and just incrementally updating all the time, right?
Sure.
Or dumping into a repository where we're doing a direct query or something like that, right? So
Yep.
those solutions are different.
Or
And
direct lake,
like
right?
Mhm.
how
Yes.
fast do you like is somebody actually is that monitor right
Yes.
always on,
Sure.
I would
and is
agree.
somebody's just
Looking at it.
looking for the red
Yes.
spike every once in a while,
Mm-hmm.
or is it something that like, oh yeah, they cycle through even
Well, there's really two products here, right? And I think the side that you're saying, the head side of this, if we'll keep using that analogy, those are incredibly granular, specific use cases where that is not just a want, but it's a necessity for the business. You mentioned IT, healthcare, or hospitals where they're going to need the real time data. Like like I said, is much past the point of want. It's going to be how the business operates.
Mm.
That is so small in terms of the industries or the companies, or in terms of the normal use cases we're going to deal with. We're probably not going to touch those scenarios. It's very small. But again, for those industries, for those companies, it's an absolute need. And unfortunately, you either need to build your own custom application within Activator or within the real time, or you're already using Event Stream or the Event Hub already. The other side of this is, and I don't know how much we can get into, but is the data activator with Power BI visuals themselves. And that's where maybe it becomes a little more broad in terms of the use cases here.
Mhm.
Because I think everything we're talking about that's coming from an Internet of Things or coming from an external source, those use cases are set up because, again, that company is relying on that real-time data. We're just not going to see a lot of those, or we're going to see a few use cases, but it's going to be just those industries.
So for those of our fans that like to see the intensity of Seth come out, I have a question.
Let's
And
see some intensity, Seth.
This episode apparently is rankling me a bit.
Uh-oh.
So the other part that I notice in this Fabric implementation and walk along for live real-time analytics
Yep.
is where, if we're going to take one of the best ways we can visualize data in a reporting in Microsoft ecosystems, and we're going to make it part of Fabric, why does this not end with Power BI?
This is a great question. Why doesn't it just land in a report? Yes.
But like, if we're going to visualize this, who's going to take real-time data and then like visualize it in this way? You're
A
not.
bar chart.
Like, you're not going to do all this so that somebody can log into a lakehouse, like, and look at a notebook and click, execute KQL query and look at my real-time data. It's like,
this is a pattern that we've
so
seen
it
recently.
rankles me a bit.
Yeah,
because
the demos
it's like,
are
bro,
not
you
real
got
world.
the full Fabric
Yes.
ecosystem here. We have like, hey, all the way from the guts, we're gonna create a solution, and it's like,
Yep. And hit run.
Where's
to
my
see
tool?
It.
Where's my tool? Where's my tool? The tool that we all know and love. That we're talking about the complications of
That's
like
your custom
running things through.
application.
So here's my question to you guys. So this is a demo of real-time data.
Yep.
Couldn't you also at the same time here, though, if they're streaming into this lakehouse, aren't we just pumping that into a Delta table?
That's what I think is happening.
Can't we just connect directly to that and read
direct
it right
link
now?
it and have it auto build a report? Even it's like a couple clicks. Then add that to the end.
This just goes to KQL.
But isn't KQL accessible?
Yeah, so you have to create another integration to push it.
No, I'm saying direct link it. Power BI direct link to the Delta table. Doesn't that work? Wouldn't it? Do I need to hit refresh on the report page for it to like?
Well, yeah. Okay. So the question
Actually,
is,
right.
in the KQL database, does that write things down? Is that actually doing Delta? So this is what I don't know. This is where I have to like spend some more time on this one.
Even in the demo, it's there. Yeah. There's a lakehouse component. You can write the KQL.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is write it into the Delta table.
Gotcha.
And then just automatically direct link to the Delta table and read it from your report. Or do we have that odd issue where it's like, I need to refresh the browser in order for Power BI to go get the most recent data, as opposed to push, where we know, even in the past, Power BI has had this functionality since forever because it was one of the coolest demo parts, right? Yeah. I'm pushing data through the report so that it automatically is changing the visualizations as they're on the dashboard. And those are two different things. It's a pull versus a push.
Yes. I will say this. I have done the demo. So there's a couple so I didn't do the KQL piece of things. I did the demo around streaming data from stock market stuff. So there's basically you can do like a streaming analytics or Synapse streaming analytics. I think they just named it streaming analytics now.
I've done the data size thing that you ran into.
This is whoops. So I'm gonna throw some wind to the caution to the wind here, and just kind of go through maybe not caution to the wind, but I'm gonna give you some cautionary tale of me playing with some of this. This is why you should play with this on a Fabric SKU that is a trial, because you may not know what it's doing. So you really need to understand the implications of this. Mm-hmm. So to give you some more context, I went in there, I turned on the streaming real-time analytics. It was very easy to do so. I said, grab these stock prices. And so every second it was grabbing all the current stock prices and writing them down. In all great IT projects, you say, this is cool, and you let it run for a couple hours, and you go away and you do something, you come back, oh yeah, this is really interesting. And then you go home for the weekend and you forget you left it on. And this happens all the time.
Ooh,
and so
that's never happened.
I realized this after about 2 weeks of collecting data, and came back to it and said, oh, I think that streaming thing is still running. I wonder if it's still going. And I go back and look at it. Yep. Every second for the last 2 weeks, it's been grabbing lots of data. And when I came back to, again, it was collecting the data. I could see the stock prices. It was very simple. And it even made a Delta table for me, which was very easy to tap into. I could build a Power BI report on top of it. It was direct linking, no problem. Everything ran really smooth. So the experience was great from a designer standpoint. Behind the scenes, what I didn't know is every time it's writing those tables, it was creating a whole bunch of more Parquet files in the Delta table. So I had 53,000 little tiny Parquet files sitting in my lakehouse. None of it was being optimized. It wasn't being compacted. It wasn't getting more efficient. And I was able to, I basically stopped the job because I figured it was running. And then I wanted to delete the data. I had over 30 gigabytes of data stored there just by turning a couple buttons on. And so if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to eat up a lot of storage space, which is not bad. I mean, 30 gigabytes, you can store a gig for a year for 21 cents. So it's darn cheap to keep the data around for a long period of time. However, if you're doing this, you could easily eat up terabytes of data just by storing things that are not even being used in the final analysis. So
yeah, that's a really good point too. From just because you're interacting with these objects like tables,
it's not necessarily cleaning itself up yet.
Tables, right? So you're not inserting a new row into a record. Get that out of your head. It's typically going to be files, individual files, doing like this little dinky stuff. And there are absolutely things you need to do to optimize and vacuum and clean up those arenas. Otherwise, that Delta table is going to slow down way exponentially. And you're going to have, to your other point, massive amounts of volume of data.
Little tiny files.
And little files and stuff that you just,
So I did a couple, and this is, if you listen, like, I don't know, 2 months ago in my complaining inside the podcast, I was complaining like, wow, there's this thing called a vacuum step and it doesn't do it and you don't optimize. Believe it or not, there is now inside the Fabric Lakehouses, there's now a right click on all the tables that are deltas. You can say optimize and it runs. There's now a button. That was not me. I did not. I just complained about it. It just appeared. So
sure. Take it as you will.
Take it as you will. It was hard. So it was hard for me to understand what was being written. And a lot of the tools like Data Flows Gen 2 will write Delta tables, but there is no optimizing. There is no cleaning up of that process based on what I understand today on how that system works. So there is other processes you need to put in place here to clean and groom out the old files you don't need inside these Delta tables. So again, this is one area that I'm like very passionate about, is just understand how the technology works, because that has implications on your design. And this is very different than what we've been doing in SQL. So we have to think about things new, and you need to understand what it's doing, because the Delta table is an immutable object, meaning you can never change it. You can only add new files that describe the final state of table data. So understanding that changes how you design the system. Sorry, I didn't mean to use big words. Michael, you're being so immutable. I don't know where that came from. It just kind of popped out.
just incomprehensible.
We expect
I had to
one
Google that. When I
every
heard that word the
episode.
first time, I was like, I had to Google, what the heck does immutable mean? What are we talking about immutable? I don't understand. You can't.
Nice.
You're an immutable.
You're immutable.
I think there's a more business friendly interface. So I don't know how much you actually played with Reflex and Data Activator yet, and that's kind of on the same stream here because I think we're all on the same opinion, at least with real time analytics and KQL. Where all right, it's neat, it's cool, still a very specific use case that I don't think any of us are seeing. But there's that, and again, there's also a very large learning curve or skill curve if you want that specific solution that you're looking for, unless you already have an event stream. Data Activator is a little different, and I think there's maybe a little more use cases here. It's almost like the upgrade version of the real-time streaming data set in Power BI, where I can actually create events, push it either from a Power BI visual, or I can actually push it from Power Automate or from any other custom application. They make that a lot more seamless, and also the time from creation to actually having some data coming in is a lot less. I don't know if that's a more broad use case where we can have some like event streaming, but
Yeah.
to me, that's where I think I see more of our use cases of more where it's going to be relatable to us.
I like your point there, Tommy, because I think another very solid use case is I'm working on Excel files. I think this is not a solid use case. This happens. I'm not sure I'm recommending it, but the idea is I'm working on Excel files in SharePoint. I'm going to hit save and that file will change. I want to go grab a table of data that came out of that file and immediately land it to something that's like a lake, a state in time of that information, right? So to your point, yeah, someone can edit the file, but it's like random. It's like I'm going to edit it twice, 3 times in one day, and then I'm going to leave it alone and walk away, and I'll come back and add some more things to it. So I don't need it to be always updated, but it would be really nice to say, hey, there is this table inside this Excel document. Every time this Excel document changes, I want to go grab a copy of that and immediately load it to my table and then process my downstream tables to make my data set update, right? These are the simple things like, like think of it in your semantic model, right? Yeah. There's missing dimensions in a dimension table, and business users are updating something in Excel, and they only need to update that one dimension table based on the information that's inside that Excel file. What's the fastest, easiest way to do that? You know what? You're making me think here. Hold on. You're blowing my mind. Hold on. If you use Direct Lake doesn't refresh the entire data set. It just it's a semantic model that looks at the tables beneath it. So if you were doing something like that, you could data activator your Excel sheet into the Delta table that describes the dimension. And so you could update the dimension table independently of your fact table, because it's, I think, the semantic link or the semantic model and the direct link or direct lake feature. It's just looking at what the data is already. It's like doing like direct query to the lake, basically. Right. So in that case, you could update individual tables without having to actually update the entire L tables in the model. I never thought of that. That's a really good use case there.
So it wasn't initially where I was going, but I like the road you're going. But have you tried so one of the use cases is be able to push to your to Direct Lake, but have you tried the data activator on a visual?
I have not. I don't know. I don't really know how that would work. So that's one thing I haven't had time to demo. Sure. So what's your opinion on that one, Tommy? Because it sounds like you have done a little demo around that.
So this is actually something that I want to explore even more, but just for myself, what you can do is anytime a visual changes on any report, and this is kind of what used to be alerts. Again, this is like the upgrade of the data set streaming and alerts in Power BI. Mm-hmm. If a visual changes, send an event to Reflex or Data Activator.
Okay, yes.
So I can track all those events. And with Data Activator, rather than taking literally everything from a visual or like what we do real-time analytics, it's like we're going to just ingest everything that's coming from that source.
Yes.
I can create specific events in a Reflex. So I can say, hey, when this card or bar chart changes, send an event with these properties. Also, if someone updates this Excel file or updates this application, push from Power Automate, send another event with these properties.
Mm-hmm.
So I can track when all these things are change affected. Now, again, right now, that's not you wouldn't call it a scalable process because you have to use Power Automate, which I will say I love Power Automate, and there's entire organizations I know that rely on it.
Yeah.
Where you can add this as one of the actions to say, now let's track those changes.
Mm-hmm.
This to me is a much more broader implication, and also probably more use cases for organizations who they're maybe not relying on real-time analytics, but they do want to be able to see and affect these changes on a closer scale.
Mm-hmm.
See, but so there's two parts of this that I think are then missing in an article like this for future recommendation. Like the use case. What's the use case? All we have is like, hey, you can track something going across the sky. And we even reference data activator and a reflex to say like, hey, you can set alerts. Why would I want to set alert? You could like make it meaningful. You can set an alert with your location and time. So the data activator is going to shoot something off to you that says in 10 minutes, the ISIS is going to be overhead. So you can see it screaming across the sky. Oh my gosh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
I also think you bring up a good use case because data activator.
You're talking about the satellite in the sky, not the bad people. Okay.
Yeah, I was about to
satellite
say,
in the sky.
ISS.
Okay.
International Space Station.
ISS.
That's what,
I didn't know
that's what this article is about.
I didn't know they could fly. I was just confirming you were talking about a space station. Sorry.
Nor would
I'm
I
getting
say
that from Power BI. We have some problems.
The other part about
moving
this,
on.
The other part about this that I think could have been taken next step is like, hey, for real-time dashboarding and reporting, do you really want that just pumping live data across the screen? Or in reality, are you looking for things? Because if you're looking for things, I don't need to give you that. I can just plug in data activator and I can say, I see this anomaly. And as I see this anomaly, what you need to go is go refresh your report or go log in and get the information that is starting to be collected around the events that are happening right now that you've identified as a trigger. That's what's helpful, right?
Yeah.
The triage of a problem that we've identified or that like we're setting up things. And you do that with like, I think even in here, it's like they're referencing logic apps and things like that. There are systems that allow us to like fire off alerts. Azure's full of them, right? Data activators is the business case of that. Hey, I have a bunch of these things going on. I want to start tracking them. Shoot me some sort of notification based on what I'm telling you to let me know whether or not I have a problem. Well, that's a lot more valuable than, you know, a screen of streaming data, because what if somebody doesn't see it, right?
And I think again, this is the scalable, or this is the upgrade version, because there's kind of a way to do this before. However, it was a lot of steps for one alert. I had to create a KPI card, put it in a dashboard, set the alert. And then let that go. But I can create one reflex or one data activator, and I can create events from all my reports all in one, in a sense, product. So all these events coming in can come from any of my reports. It's not like I have to create another reflex and another product for each.
You don't need to create another reflex.
Well, the reflex is the product, and then you have events in it. So I just create an event per action, so to speak. So you're creating something, but it's not like I have 18 artifacts in my freaking workspace.
What I'm driving at is like, I don't have to create another workspace.
There's 4 workspaces.
Oh, you should have another workspace for that. You should build,
and you should. I was wondering if I needed multiple reflexes within a data activator.
Oh, each reflex
to work
activity should have its own
with
workspace.
my multiple workspaces.
Yeah.
Each workspace has the 5 reflexes. And totally clear. Thanks.
React to the reflex, that's the workspace kind of thing.
And then every action should have its own workspace. So you should have at least 1,000.
Workspace.
Because some actions shouldn't be visible to other people.
Exactly right.
Workspace.
100%. You don't want that would be inappropriate to have all actions shown to everyone.
You have 3 workspaces for the KQL, one for the K.
So this is the type of conversation that would happen if somebody said like, "Hey, where is that thing happening?" It's like, "Oh, no, it's not. It's not. It's in this workspace.
It's happening everywhere."
No, are you sure?
This is not the activity you're looking
80
for.
Workspaces. What's the solution to this? Millions of dollars in purview. Yep.
Not wrong. Not wrong.
How do I find anything? We don't know.
It's in purview. That's amazing. I like it. I like it a lot. All right, so that's awesome. So I think we're at a good time to do final thoughts on this, on our topic today. So final thoughts around real-time events and how Fabric's changing the game around real-time event. Tommy, let's go with your final thoughts.
If you're already using real-time streaming, or you see your organization that has a need for it, if you're already using Event Stream or you're already using the Event Hub, there's a possible really great kind of integration here. If there's more business cases where it's one-off, look at Data Activator, look at Reflex. You don't have to go through the whole, we got to build our custom application. I think there's definitely more than one use case with Reflex that you can provide, prove, or provide impact for your team using Activator.
Seth, any kind of final thoughts on how do you see this?
Love it. I love live streaming events. No, I think what people should know is it's very accessible, especially in cloud ecosystems like Azure. It's fantastic. Like so much wealth of information related to eventing that you may be very interested in, and it's very accessible. So that's fantastic. Getting it into a location for you to query and or shoot into alerting systems, even easier now with Data Activator. So I love the fact that it's even much more accessible, and the solutions are easier to implement. Make sure it's a worthwhile use case though, right? To your points, Mike, you could potentially create a lot of storage, which initially isn't going to be a big deal, but over time you'd want to recognize and make sure you have cleanup activities or things like that behind the scenes to really manage how much you're actually storing. On the front end, you can use Power BI. There's multiple different solutions for visualization of things. Make sure it's applicable to the business case that you need. I don't see a ton of them out there, but the fact that we have the capabilities to see this data as fast as we can, and there are different choices, I think is pretty cool.
I think my final observation here is kind of what I have alluded to in the past around this is faster data, more money. You're gonna need to just more data volume, more money. You have to be smart about how you are going to consume the information and store it in a way that makes sense. I'd also think the other point here around splitting your real-time analytics away from your long-running historical analytics, I think is a smart decision. Try to hone in on one use case as instead of trying to build, both use cases all together in one solution. All right, with that, I say thank you very much for listening to the podcast. If you found this enjoyable or even got some insights out of this, we'd love it for you to share with somebody else. We don't spend a dime on marketing this thing, so it's all on you guys to kind of push it out there and let other people know you found value from this podcast. We appreciate your time. We hope you had a good run on your treadmill or your walk or whatever you're doing right now. So for those of you who listen purely online and don't watch the YouTube video, we still like you as well. We appreciate all your listenership. Thank you so much. Please let somebody else know you found value in this episode and share it with somebody else. Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe and leave a rating. Helps us out a ton. If you have a question, idea, or topic that you want us to talk about in a future episode, head over to powerbi.tips/podcast. Leave your name and a great question. Finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, and join the conversation on all of Power BI Tips social media channels.
Thanks, guys, so much. Appreciate it. I'll see you next time.